the schooner Amistad was making her way from Freetown in Sierra Leone on the western coast of Africa to Porto de Praia in Cape Verde. We were 11 days on that passage, and it was not the kind of sailing that you might wish for. We were slamming through 15-foot seas the whole time. And as much as I like to think of myself as a true deep-water sailor who can handle anything, 11 days of 15-foot seas gets old. It especially gets old when your stomach is up around your ears and when things are breaking loose in the galley because of the pounding the boat's taking. It was scary. But I kept looking back and seeing my friend Eliza Garfield, the captain of the boat, as she would make her way about her duties and show no concern whatsoever for the little bitty 15-foot waves. She'd been out a lot more, having been captain of other vessels over many years. She was perfectly calm and peaceful. And so watching her and dealing with my own nervousness at the time, I finally got to the point where I could stand at the wheel of the schooner, and when we topped a 15-footer and went down into the trough and the spray broke over the bows, they were going, "Ooh," I could finally go, "Whee!" It still took an effort, though. It wasn't the kind of, one of those mind-over-matter kinds of wheeze. For Jesus followers out in that boat in a storm, they looked back and found that Jesus wasn't there walking around calmly. He was flat asleep. He was napping through the whole thing, and rather than inspiring confidence, those disciples were convinced that he just didn't care. Can you imagine what that must have been like? Instead of looking back to their teacher as taking charge and handling things, he was just minding his own business, not appearing to give a whit for what was going on with them. If I was scared of a schooner, I know those disciples were terrified as the storm licked up around them. And so finally they woke him up. And I imagine that it probably wasn't a gentle, Jesus, excuse me, Jesus, can you wake up for a second? No, it couldn't have been one of those. You know, it was a, Jesus! Sometimes we all yell like that, don't we? Especially when things are coming down around our ears. So they yelled, Jesus, wake up! Don't you care that we're dying? And he sat up and rubbed the sleep out of his eyes and looked at him and said, why are you afraid? Do you still have so little faith? And then Jesus turned to the waters and the wind and said, peace, be still. And they were. Can you imagine what that must have been like? To go from terror that was so great that you would scream at Jesus to having all of the seas quiet down around you. Who is this man that even the winds and the waves obey him? The disciples went on to find out just who he was. And in their turn went out sharing the good news of Jesus, the Messiah, the one sent from God to transform and redeem the world. And I'm sure that question stayed with them. Why are you afraid? Do you still have so little faith? David, who was years away from being king, when offered King Saul's armor, refused it. And David said to Saul, "Let no one's heart fail because of him, that giant. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." And we all know how that worked out, too. With Goliath on his back, and David, unarmored, standing victorious. In the letter to the Corinthians, we hear Paul talking about being ready with weapons for the left and the right hand, ready to do battle. But you know, I think we've heard enough about weapons this week. All of us are heartsick. It wasn't our state, or our denomination, or our church, but the news from Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, is news that has touched us all and crushed us all. As we hear the story of a troubled young man coming to a Bible study, sitting there for an hour, getting to know people, and murdering them. Today we gather remembering those 9 killed. The Reverend Clementa Pinckney, Tawanza Sanders, Cynthia Hurd, Reverend Sharonda Coleman Singleton, Myra Thompson, Ethel Lance, Reverend Daniel Simmons, Reverend DePayne Middleton Doctor, and Susie Jackson. 9 sisters and brothers taken from us this week by a hand of violence. And we are left aghast as we listen to news commentators say things like, "I don't know how something like this could happen. We can't know what was in his mind," even though the shooter told us exactly what was in his mind. Hatred. Pure and simple hatred. Racism. Evil. There are those who point to mental illness, saying he must have been crazy. Well, unless we assume that everyone who acts violently towards someone else is crazy, it doesn't look like that applies. The shooter had detailed his hatred, had detailed his prejudice, had detailed his desire to take back America from people who didn't look like him. It's not craziness. It's systematic, societal evil, finding expression in the violent actions of one person, but also represented in the Confederate flag. Not just the Confederate flag with which the shooter posed, but the one flying at the South Carolina State House. We build these systems, and then we're surprised when people act violently. We've seen people, thousands of them, rallying at the South Carolina State House, demanding that that Confederate flag come down. We've seen others saying, that is a symbol of our heritage. My great-great-granddaddy fought for the Confederacy. Now, I may be the only Southerner here in a room full of Yankees. And I'm going to say something that's completely un-Southern. You see, we Southerners are known for our tact, for our gentility of phrasing. But when I hear people talk about our heritage, the answer that comes to my mind is simply bullshit. Yeah, I said that. Now, we are facing evil in a society that disguises itself as heritage. We are seeing systemic racism that comes up again and again and masks itself as culture. Friends, we need to call bullshit when we see it. It's not easy. It's scary. It puts us on the defensive when we start asking questions and we're accused of being the traitors to, well, something. Traitors to life? Traitors to history? Traitors to... No. We need to speak honestly, to not mince words. Here in Connecticut, we like to believe that we are free from that stain of racism. We know better. We may not have Confederate flags flying in the grounds in Hartford. We better not. But I can tell you that I see them on pickup trucks. I see them on people's front porches. And as a Southerner, I can tell you I don't have one. We don't need it. So how do we deal with it? How do we move forward? We do it as people who are troubled in our souls. We do it as people who don't know how to make sense of the violence around us, as people who hear images of coming prepared for battle with weapons for the right hand and the left hand, and we think, thank God that's a metaphor. But we do it as people who are called to action, as people who maybe like David can say, no, I don't need your sword, I don't need your armor, I need to do things in a different way. I need to be able to approach things differently. We need to be courageous, just like those disciples weren't. We need to be able to find Jesus even when it looks like he's asleep in our boat, to find him present with us. We need to take strength from that as well. And we need to look to the people who have been able to show courage. Before worship this morning, somebody had said to me, I hear these words of forgiveness coming from the mouths of people who have had their loved ones killed. And I'm not there. I'm not either. I want to be, I try to be, and I'm not. But when I see people who are able to offer a word of peace, a word of forgiveness, a word of grace, even to someone who killed their loved ones, I find hope. And I find an example. I think back to Captain Eliza, how she was able to be in command of the schooner going through what I thought was difficult seas. And her calm presence helped me to be calm. It taught me something about seafaring. And I think the witness that we're seeing in South Carolina of Christians offering forgiveness helps us to learn how to be forgiving. We're not there yet. I'm amazed that anyone is there. And the forgiveness is for the individual. For the troubled young man who came up in a society that warped him. Was he responsible? Yes. Was God's grace big? Yes. Bigger than we can imagine. But there's a difference between forgiving an individual and forgiving an attitude. We're called to battle with attitudes. We're called to battle with culture. We're called to battle with racism. We are called to battle with any force that harms God's people. That's not the place for forgiveness. We forgive people. We don't forgive hatred. I wanted to preach a happy sermon today, but the news of the week pulled me from a simple question of why are you frightened? Don't be. To a harder look, asking why are you frightened? Are we frightened of physical violence? We know that death isn't the end. Are we frightened of pushback from a culture that doesn't want to hear a message of peace? We shouldn't be. Are we frightened of someone, well, maybe you're exempt as Yankees, but are we frightened of someone saying, that's your heritage, why are you turning your back on it? Shouldn't be. We're called to be bold, to be brave, to be strong. We're called to transform our society and to do it with peace and love. We're called to use our hearts, not as weapons of war, but as tools for transformation. May God then be with us as we move forward as people who maybe are a bit frightened, but are reminded by Jesus to have faith. Let's give it a shot. Amen.